Good evening. Imagination plays an important role in all scientific discoveries. This is an attempt to bring about the role that imagination plays in science, its boundaries, and on the importance of making abstractions in science. The scientist who wants to know the truth about nature must have a basic conviction that there is truth hidden in nature. With that belief alone can he become a discoverer of the truths of nature. Otherwise, he will remain a mere scientific scholar who may quote scientific opinions on various subjects, but he cannot become a scientist himself. Pure science is the product not only of clear reason or sharp intellect, but also of some deep faith within the scientist, faith in the truthfulness of nature. Faith in the form of imagination plays a greater role than reason in pure science. Thus, apart from reason or intellect that functions in the discovery of truth in physical science, intuition also plays a vital part in all scientific discoveries. Imagination helps critical reason to develop into critical intuition. In many scientific discoveries, we can see this creative play of imagination and its intuitive byproducts. For example, seeing a particular apple falling, Newton could make this inductive jump to the cosmic level that the same force of gravitation is what makes the moon fall towards the earth, what makes for the movements of all the planets and the stars, and what reveals itself as a universal force exerted by every material on the other bodies in the universe. Imagination helps reason to discover new truths by induction from the known to the unknown. To begin with, a scientist knows something. He does not know what lies beyond it, but his imagination tells him that there are deeper truths beyond what he knows. Here is seen the spirit of faith, which has the strength to accommodate doubt, the doubt of the most creative kind. Gray Walter, in his book, The Living Brain, says that the capacity of man for imaging ideas and choosing from several alternatives is what gives man dominion over nature. Albert Einstein writes, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. It is, strictly speaking, a real factor in scientific research. According to Fritjof Capra, the rational part of the research would be useless if it were not complemented by the intuition that gives scientists new insights and makes them creative. At this point, let me talk a bit on what is scientific imagination. The principle of science is that the test of all knowledge is experiment. Experiment is the sole judge of scientific truth. But what is the source of knowledge? Where do the laws that are to be tested come from? We find that observations alone are not sufficient to make up the body of knowledge which we call science. The task of an experimenter is to ask nature the right questions, and that requires imagination. Experiment itself helps to produce these laws in the sense that it gives us hints. But also needed is imagination to create from these hints the great generalizations, to guess at the wonderful, simple, but very strange patterns beneath them all, and then to check again whether we have made the right guess. This imagining process is quite difficult but it is a must. Science makes high demands on imagination. It requires a much higher degree of imagination to understand the electromagnetic field than to understand the invisible angels. The degree of imagination that is required is much more intense than that is required for some ancient ideas. Modern ideas are far harder to imagine. Richard Feynman feels that people in other disciplines often misunderstand the whole question of imagination in science. He says that many a times people test our imagination in the following way. They say, here is a picture of some people in a situation. What do you imagine will happen next? When we say, I can't imagine, they may think that we have a weak imagination. According to Feynman, these people overlook the fact that whatever we are allowed to imagine in science must be consistent with everything we know. For example, consider the electromagnetic waves. They are not just some thoughts which we are free to make as we wish, but ideas which must be consistent with the physics that we know. It is a mistake to seriously imagine things which are obviously in contradiction to the well-established laws of nature. One has to have the imagination to think something that has never been seen before, never been heard before. But the thoughts should be restricted, limited by the conditions that come from our existing knowledge of the way nature is. Roger Newton says one essential difference between the imagination of an artist and that of a scientist is that while the artist is subject to no other authority, the scientist has to bow before the final arbiter of truth as revealed by the experiment. Whenever I think of the role of imagination in science, one thing comes to my mind, and that is the importance of making abstractions in science, especially in physics. Many people have a hatred of abstraction, chiefly I think because of its intellectual difficulty. They say that all reality is concrete, and in making abstractions, we are leaving out the essential. The extreme abstractness of modern physics makes it difficult to understand, but gives to those who can understand it a grasp of the world as a whole, a sense of its structure, and a mechanism which no less abstract thing could possibly, explain. The power of using abstractions is the essence of intellect. And with every increase in abstraction, the intellectual triumphs of science are enhanced. Before this gets too long, I hope to conclude with the hope that you too feel the role of imagination in science is not just significant, but of utmost importance. I would love to hear from you your thoughts on the role of imagination in science. Thank you.